Welcome to the EQ Podcast. Welcome to the EQ Podcast, a show focused on equipping ministry leaders within the Calvary Chapel Association in the Pacific Northwest. I'm your host, Zach Lamerson, and I have on the show another friend of mine, Pastor Calvary Chapel Walla Walla, Tom Rush. How you doing, Tom?
Hey, I'm good.
So, Tom, here's my first question, and here's I typically ask my guests, how did you get here? I'm not talking about the podcast, obviously. You know how we got there. But how did you get into ministry? Could you give us like a quick origin story of Tom Rush, how you got saved, and then also how you got called into ministry and what transitioned you into planting Calvary Chapel Walla Walla? You've been there for over 10 years now. When did you plant Calvary Chapel Walla Walla?
We planted in 2011. We moved here and planted that year. So it's been 12 years now. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's your kind of your origin, your background a little bit for our listeners?
So I grew up going to Calvary Chapel in Olympia at Pastor Chuck Lynn's church. That's now John Sine's pastoring that now. He retired. Chuck Lynn retired. Grew up going there really young. Like I think we were 3. I was 3 when we first started going, and grew up in that church. I remember asking Jesus into my heart. I think I was 2, maybe I was 3. I was at VBS, not a Calvary VBS, but I was at a VBS that my neighbor took me to, and I think it was kind of a crazy hyper charismatic church, but I remember that was it. Like I asked Jesus into my heart, and I never doubt that. However, when I was 11, we had a guy come visit the church. I think his name was Joseph Jones. He had been like a drug lord, kind of drug selling higher up, and had this crazy story. And it, his testimony convicted me, and the Holy Spirit got a hold of my heart. And I think I was visiting my big sisters. They had a youth event, and I was just there. So I gave my heart to the Lord there. That was like immediate change for me. I got baptized that summer, and then in the fall, back in that time, we did all these, our church did all these things with Wayne Taylor. We would do these outreaches and stuff. And we had a Crystal Lewis concert, and a evangelistic Crystal Lewis concert, and did a crusade. It was just at our local church. And I remember Wayne was up giving the altar call. And as a pastor now, I just cringe. I'm like, I cannot believe that this happened. But so he was up giving the altar call, like their band was still playing a little bit and stuff. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit was like, you need to go and give your testimony. I didn't even know I was 11. I didn't know what a testimony was. Right. Like, you need to go talk to people. And I was just like, I don't want to do that, and it was really, really strong. So I went up to the front of this stage, and I think Wayne was still talking, and I cannot believe that he did this, but I was like, hey, can I have the mic? God wants me to share something, or I don't know what I said, but I shared my testimony. And apparently it was not that inappropriate, but it was pretty crazy. I asked him about it years later, and he's didn't remember that had happened. I'd probably try to forget too, but
yeah, it takes a lot of bravery to let an 11-year-old stand up on stage and give his testimony.
I thought I was being really off the wall, and I'm like, no, that was a lot of bravery. Can I have the mic? I'd be like, no. But then, I don't know. I didn't have plans or anything at the time. I was going to be a jet pilot when I grew up. But when, we were always at the church, our family. I was there, 4 days a week for a long period of time. My family's not in ministry or anything. We were just there. It was what we did. And did some short-term mission trips, to Tijuana and that kind of thing. One of those trips, we were doing a at one of the DTS centers through YWAM in LA, and the Lord again, kind of put a call on my life. So like, there's kind of these stages. Like I was a little kid and I know I gave my heart to the Lord. I know that mattered. And then, later on it was like, yeah, but I want your life. And then the call to ministry, I was about 14 and
Okay.
I really felt like God called me to missions. And so from that point, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And I did some like midterm missions. I did something through Applegate. They have that ministry down in Mexico, the little orphanage. I don't know if they still have it, but they had that at that time. So I spent a summer there, and then I really wanted to just go do missions. I didn't want to go to like Bible college or anything like that. But God kind of cut me up, pulled me up short, and was like, "No, you're still an idiot. So you need to go.
Yeah.
You need some training."
Good
So
call.
I did. I went to Bible college. I went to the Marietta campus. Was there for a semester, and then Pastor Tripp Kimball. He came to the campus and was talking about what he was doing in Dumaguete, Philippines, and he had an extension campus there that he was it mostly was for Filipino people, like a training center, and he was going to open it up for just a few U.S. students. So me and another friend of mine, Eric Johansson, we went kind of together to that. There was a couple other U.S. students that wound up going, but I did that, and I was really focused on missions. And then some pretty crazy family stuff happened, and I wound up right at the end of my time there as a student. I was planning on staying and like helping out with the school, and had to come home. And then I wound up kind of in the doldrums of like ministry, not knowing what next I was going to do. So my youth pastor, who when I was in youth group, I was pretty spiritually proud and messed up and really legalistic. And I'm just one of those like know-it-all Bible nerd kids. It was really annoying. So God was doing stuff in my heart, but I had a lot of like humbling to get done. Still probably that's what's going on. But so I didn't get along with my youth pastor for some reason, but
because you thought you knew better than him.
Because I thought I was way smarter than him and better than him. Yeah, that's pretty much how I wasn't, but that's what I thought. But yeah, so he was starting a church in Aberdeen. His name's Sean Hall, and he's still pastoring out there. Awesome guy. And so he was just starting like doing Sunday night Bible studies with a couple people that had been coming out to Olympia. It's like an hour from there, and doing that church plant thing. So there was like not much to do. There's a lot of positions that were like filled at the Calvary and Olympia from like other students and stuff. And so I just started going out there and helping him. And then I met my wife doing that. She came and helped, like she lived in Olympia, was one of the other graduate Bible college students from Marietta. And she started coming out with me, and we wound up moving there and helping with that church for 8 years. And then in 2010, I really felt like God was putting it on my heart to start a church, but I didn't know where. So I moved back to Olympia. Olympia, one of the things Chuck Lind has really excelled at is sending people out. I was just kind of, that church is just a spider. There's like a web of churches that go out from it. So we went back there, and I thought it would be more of a long-term stay, but it was really only like 8 months that we were there. And we found out that there was not a church here in Walla Walla. And that's what we were looking for, like a little town that didn't have a church, didn't have a Calvary Chapel church.
Right.
And so there was actually a small church plant that Rick Standard was just kind of about to wrap up and kind of fold. And so there was a group of people that were interested in starting again. And so we wound up coming out and doing that in 2011. And so that was a weird experience, because I really didn't know how to start a church. Build a team, find a place, start advertising, there was a lot of stuff I was just like, I don't even know how to start that. And it turned out there was a little group of people that just already wanted to have services. So it was a weird start, but that's how we started. So.
Oh, that's awesome. So you kind of just jumped in and had a little bit of a maybe the remnants of a church that was already there that you kind of were able to kind of start running
Yeah. So organizationally, we totally restarted, but it was with people that had been a part of a Calvary, a Calvary, at least doctrinally, a Calvary church and stuff like that. So yeah,
that's helpful. So you're what we call in the game a tent maker, in that you still have a part-time job to help supplement your income. What my question is, what encouragement would you give to someone wanting to plant a church and would need to find a job to support themselves during that process?
I that's been a thing that I have struggled with. I think that people struggle with that. Like, they know it's kind of like being a musician, like wanting, like, I want to make money. I want to be able to do this full time,
I also want
to
to eat.
A job. I want to eat. My wife keeps complaining about the kids being hungry, but, I actually, well, so Pastor Sean, I watched him start that church and go from, the first 8 years is kind of that starting period. And he had support from the Calvary in Olympia, I think for like a year or 6 months, or he'd have to tell you, but he had support because he had been on salary, and then they had to, he wasn't there anymore. Eventually they were very supportive, but in a kind of Calvary Chapel, like, here you go, kind of way. So like, that's our deal. So they helped him out, but then he had to find a job, and he was working a couple part-time jobs, like, just doing whatever. Part-time jobs are hard to make good money doing. And so I, during that time, had an inkling that I was going to have to do that if I was going to be a part of a Calvary Chapel plant or ministry start of some sort. Like, I knew pretty halfway through the period of time that I was there that that's what we were going to do. Like, we weren't ready to go do it, but it was time to prepare. So I went to nursing school because I have family that are nurses, and that was a job. Like, I prepared to do this job as a bivocational job. So I had, previous to that time, was a carpenter and had been pretty successful with that. But I thought, that small business is it's hard to be an entrepreneur. I know Steve did that very successfully. I think I hadn't started a small business though. So I was like, what I would have to do is go and start a small business without that experience. I had a little bit of business experience with starting my own stuff, kind of in a slipshod way. And I was like, I don't like that. It was also 2008 and the building market was garbage.
It was a bad time to start a business.
Yeah, I was like, I need to just have a job that I can taper and kind of titrate for what our family needs. And so that has worked out really well for us. So on one hand, it's kind of like not what you want to do. Like, you want to plan to, if you're a pastor, it's your calling. That's like, this is what I want to do. But if you know that's kind of in the cards for you, it's okay to, like, my encouragement would be, it's okay to, like, if that's what the Lord's calling me into, then it's okay to, like, pursue that a little bit, invest in it, and make a good version of that. That's paid off in spades for me. So, also, second thing is that job has been one of the biggest blessings for me in evangelism and ministry. Like, I can't, not just patience. Like, the long game of working with people it's been 12 years now. I have really good relationships with people at work. And, I spend so much time talking to people about the Lord, and I cannot believe there's people that I work with, like, cause I'm kind of a knucklehead,
right?
And I'm goofy and sarcastic, and I'm, I cannot believe there are people that I work with that are like, I want to come to your church. I'm like, why would you? I'm pretty sure I completely blew my witness so many times with you. And they're like, oh, we should try it out. Oh, we love it. And I'm like, that doesn't, okay, fine. But you know what you're going to get.
I disagree with you. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah. I think we're still doing that. I'm still, like, I got my nursing degree thinking that would be a 2-year, like, I would do that because I could afford to do it. We didn't have kids, and my wife could work and help me get through that. I thought it would be like a 5-year thing, and I've been a nurse for 16 years now. So it's been a long time, but in Washington, they just keep giving me raises. It's a union state. So I only work there. I work there like 24 hours a week. And I don't think there's another job in the world that they'd be like, well, good job this year. Here's another raise. Like you worked for us part time. Like
Right.
yeah. So that's, that kind of thing, like invest a little bit into it. Don't just like kind of, you can cause yourself grief just hoping that there's something else,
No, that's
like,
good advice.
yeah.
For a long time, you worked full time. So you basically worked both as full time as a pastor and then as a nurse, and then your transition to part time. What does that transition look like? And when did you know you need to kind of cut back?
So that's been a back and forth thing. We have just consistently looked at what the church needed. So when I first started, I worked what they call per diem, which is essentially your unit or units. I work on a bunch of different units or can. They'll just say like how many days they need. And then you say, yeah, I'll work this day, that day, this day, that day. And I did that for 6 years after we moved here, 6 or 7. And that worked out really good because I could just like tailor my work schedule for whatever God wanted me to be doing or whatever.
Right.
But man, we were doing the like we've also had this backstory of I think 5 or 6 different church locations, and all of them like remote, box church, set up church on Sunday morning, and do church. And we got to a place where I was like watching church members fatigue, myself being fatigued, just doing the logistical setup was like all the extracurricular our church could handle just because it's so much work. And so people that are willing hearts and ready to serve, their service looked like putting out chairs, which is great. But I know that, eventually people want to like do outreach and they have the energy to do that. And so it was a weird thing. God put it on my heart in October, about 6 years ago. I'm just going to give generalizations because I'm not good with dates, but about 6 years ago in October, God put it on my heart. I was working per diem still, and there was a position that I could take. It was full time, and that doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would I go to more work? Financially, the church was doing great. Everything was fine, but it felt like that was the thing I was supposed to do. So I was like, okay. And what we did when we did that was I had been taking like a partial housing allowance from the church. And so I quit taking that and I just went to work full time, and I didn't have anything to spend the money on. I just felt like that was like literally just like, this is what you should do. And I was like, I don't really want to. Like I wanted to be a pastor when I grew up, not do this. But I did. And then in January, our building fell through, the one we were leasing. And we had like a month to find another building. And there was a bar, a like condemned bar across town. And we leased that. We remodeled the inside of it. And we got essentially, it was a direct trade. So what I had been taking as a housing allowance was exactly within like $50, exactly what it cost us to lease the building. And the trade-off was like, it's what I wanted. I've been talking to him like, God, we need a building. Like, we can't just keep doing this box church thing. And he's like, well, why don't you go work full time? I'm like, are you kicking me out of ministry? Like, I don't understand. Like, this is kind of not the direction I was hoping to go. What I want is, this to happen. And when I saw we've got the lease finalized and stuff, and I realized that was exactly the trade I'd made, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Because what the church at the time didn't need me to be in an office, 5 days a week. The church needed a place to meet and a place to welcome people to. And that changed a lot for us. So, now we have gotten into it, the church has grown, and I'm taking about the same housing allowance I was back then, but it just was for a period of time. And so when that transition happened, I switched back to taking a partial and working part-time again. So.
Well, that worked out. Yeah. That worked out. And I like how, you kind of had the expectation that, at first you're going to be part-time and you're going to transition to less hours of work and more church, but God had kind of reversed it for a season, and you didn't know why, but obviously there's a purpose there. So I think that's
Yeah.
good.
And I was like, if I had, as far as my time during my day, if I was going to go volunteer somewhere, or volunteer at the church to make a building work for the church, I would spend the extra 20, because, it's like another 20 hours. It's like, I would spend 20 hours working as a maintenance guy on a building for the sake of having a building. So I just realized after the fact, I was like, literally, this is paying for that. Like, it's great. It worked out perfect.
Yeah.
So it's pretty great.
That's awesome. So I had a question. Walla Walla has a lot of Seventh-day Adventists. Have you interacted much with them, or had any, start coming to your church? I just know that demographic there. I
Yeah.
was curious if you had some insight onto that.
We have a lot of Seventh-day Adventists. We have quite a few ex-Seventh-day Adventists as well. Yeah, one of the things, through work, I meet a lot of people, and have had this cool, that job I took, that full-time position. During that period of time, I got really close. It was a small unit. We spent a ton of time together. I got really close with some of the guys, and we did a Bible study for like 2 years. And they were like, "Hey, let's go through." One of the guys went through a rough period of time, and I spent like 6 months going through the book of Romans with him. And then another guy, they wanted to do a Bible study. So we did a Bible study at my house for like 2 years. They did Romans, and then they wanted to do Galatians. And that was hilarious, because I was like, You guys know that Galatians is like the pulls the pen out of Adventism, right? Like, this is like, we did Romans, and now
Romans would be the other book, I would think.
Well, we never do Galatians in our church, and I was like, yeah, I forgot you don't.
You guys don't do that. It's weird.
Weird. I don't understand why you wouldn't. So yeah, there's a lot of Adventism in this town, and it's a lot of, it's basic legalism. I have I told you, you mentioned that I was pretty spiritually proud young guy. And I don't know how I managed to, but I managed to grow up like theologically super legalistic as a kid in a not legalistic church.
Yeah.
But I did. And so I identified quite a bit with their, like, kind of their struggle and that kind of lifestyle. So that's been a kind of a constant thing, reaching out to them. So, I don't know. I feel like there's such a broad thing. Is there more specific thing you were wondering about that?
No, I was just curious
how that interaction goes, or yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like I said, it's just an area that I know, when I think of, certain parts of Idaho, I'm like, well, that's really inundated with Mormons. So I've asked questions like, how do you guys do outreach, or how do you engage with it?
Yeah. Well, and that, it's one-on-one. I think that's the best with any cult. Like, the frontal approach on your porch is like minimal, when they're geared up with their notebook and their algorithm of how to defeat Christianity. It's a non-starter, but relationship wise, it's that long game I was talking about.
Yep.
But I had a really cool experience. There's a lot of believers, probably, most people know there's a lot of believers in the Adventist church that are like true doctrine, born again believers.
Yep.
Mostly due to ignorance about their doctrine. One of the great things that Adventism does is they kind of obscure their actual church doctrine for a lot of people. And there's kind of an active undercurrent of people that are trying to do that because they don't believe in Ellen G. White or the core doctrines of the church. And they don't feel like leaving the church just out of like loyalty, and, they'd rather reform it from inside.
Yep.
I met a guy that was way into the Gospel Coalition pretty early on in our church plant. And he started coming to Bible studies at our church and stuff like that. Really great guy, born again, filled with the Spirit, on fire for the Lord. Came to me and was like, what do I do? I'm like an elder at the Adventist church. And I was like, do I leave? Do I nail something to the door and walk out, or what do I do? Like this, like what I literally, like, I don't know what to do, because I don't believe what this church believes anymore. And I was like, well, why don't you do what Paul did? Like, he would just say what he thought at synagogues until they kicked him out, and then he left. Yeah. So he did that. He did that for about 3 years, and his pastor was very sympathetic to what he was doing. To compromised, maybe, whatever you want to call it, too shy to do that himself because he would be scrutinized really heavily.
Yeah.
So this guy, this pastor, this elder, he said that his pastor would send him to like all the little satellite churches that don't have regular. He was an itinerant preacher in the area, and he would go and like they wouldn't invite him back, but he'd just lay out the gospel when he went and like full on, yeah. So that was, I mean, that kind of that's been my experience. A lot of ex-Adventists that just don't know where to go. They've been told all the other churches are anathema or whatever, and so they don't know what to do. But yeah, that's kind of part of it.
No,
but there's a lot of that undercurrent.
So I heard you speak at our school of ministry once, and you told a story about the time that you got to ask Chuck Smith a question at a pastor's conference. I think it was a pastor's conference, but I just want the listeners to hear what was the question, and then how did he respond? Because I thought it was such a good encouragement for people.
Okay. Well, so I was a youth pastors conference, and they used to do these open mics, you know, where it was just like, I'm sure it's again like one of those things. I'm like, I don't know why Chuck tolerated that. That'd be really irritating. Like, you know, but these guys set him up with an open mic, you know.
Right.
So there's a line of people, and I at the time was I was knowing my story a little bit. It's good because it'll shorten this, but I was really strongly desiring to know what God had for me in the future. I'd started helping with that church. It was only like 2 years into being at the church in Aberdeen. And I really felt like I had missed, on one hand, I'd missed a huge calling and opportunity due to kind of circumstances beyond my control with my family and struggling with that. Like, okay, I didn't do that plan that God had for me. Now, is there a plan, and what is that plan? I'm just going to be faithful and keep grinding away, but I'd like to know what the plan is.
Yeah.
And so I was in that period of like waiting, and I think somebody had been talking about waiting and what that means and stuff. And I asked him, how do I can't remember exactly my question, but I kind of explained like I'm waiting, but how do I wait well? Right? Like, how do I be better at waiting while I wait? And, he totally blew me off. Like, and I was super mad at him, because he was just like, I think it was one of those times where he didn't understand my question, and it was just like, sounded like a stupid question. And honestly, it might've been like emotionally or spiritually a stupid question. Like in retrospect, I wasn't being flippant, but I was just like, I'm supposed to be waiting. What do you do while you wait? And, I don't remember what my great answer was for that last time I talked to you. But I know that like, that verse, it says that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They'll mount up with wings like eagles. And it's occurred to me that waiting on the Lord is just literally not anything more like spiritual than that. Like it's being willing to not move forward until God tells you what it really is that you're moving forward into, and not, Bob Hoekstra used to say, don't just do something, stand there. Talking about standing in the grace of God.
Yeah.
And I think that for me, that's been a thing over the last year or so that God's just put on my heart, is to let people know that, Saul waited on Samuel when he was going to make the sacrifice, because the people were starting, and then he was waiting, but with like an ultimatum, like, I'll wait this long, but no longer.
Mm-hmm.
And waiting on the Lord means that you've determined that you're going to wait on him until you hear from him. What's the next thing to do? Not like, well, I'll wait this long and then it's on you. I had to go do something.
Yeah.
So, so I think that's at least where I'm at with it right now. I hope that I don't know what inspiring.
I remember. This is what I remember from the question, and maybe it'll click for you. But Chuck's response is what stood out to me. And you said that he said, "Just be faithful, just be faithful." Mm-hmm. And then you're kind of like, whatever. Like, what is that? Does it do me any good? And I've used that so much since you said that, because I do ministry with young adults, and they're always looking for that. What do I need to do? What can I do right now? How do I move on? And I just tell them, wherever you're at, just be faithful. If you're right now,
Hmm.
if you're, the greeter, if you're moving chairs, or, you have that ministry and you kind of have ambitions to do something greater, just that
Yeah.
encouragement to be faithful where you're at in that moment. And I think you told me, like, I remember you saying that you didn't like that answer from Chuck and you're kind of mad at him. And so,
Yeah. And it was probably, yeah. And that probably is what he said. It's essentially, that's definitely what it came down to. Like
yeah,
verbatim, that's what he said or not. That's what he was said. Just like, well, just keep being faithful to what you're doing. And, I was like, in my head, I was like, I am, but I'm not happy about it. But that is an answer. Like, don't. And I guess that's part of what I was trying to say without knowing. I could not remembering what Chuck had said at the time. But yeah, like just don't be like, okay, I'm gonna be faithful, but only for this period of time, and then something better crack.
yeah,
Is we, planning this church, it's been, or being bivocational. Like I could have put a timeline on that. Like, well, I'll be bivocational, but only for a couple of years.
yeah.
And if I'd have had a timeline on that, we'd have passed it so long ago. I don't know where I'd be, but I like what we're doing. I like where our church is at. But we wouldn't be doing this if I'd have been like, well, fully on that, I'm gonna go, I'm just gonna go do something else, or go find a job at a church, which wasn't my calling, So
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's good. I think that encouragement to not put a time limit on things, especially like you said, when you have an expectation of, I feel like God's going to call me to this position or this place, and in that waiting, you kind of have a timeline for what it looks like, and just to
yeah,
be and patient and faithful during that process is really, I think, an encouragement that guys need to hear, because like there are guys in your exact position, that are in some kind of waiting period. They're in bivocational, wanting to be in full time ministry, not because it's the end game of finances or something. It's really like you want
right,
to be able to pour your heart into what you're doing. But
yeah,
I mean, I get the expectation of like that's going to somehow be more fulfilling. But I love what you're doing, Tom, because you are, like you said, you get one of the things that I've been on full time staff at Calvary for 18 years, and so I don't get the interaction. I don't get to do the witnessing and the stuff. I mean, people come into my office, and I've witnessed people gotten saved, but not like where I'm on the job with people and sharing with
yeah.
non-believers and that interaction, especially with patients each day, just kind of getting. And so there's an aspect of, from my perspective, that I am jealous of what you're doing. So I think it's good.
Yeah, and it's easy to forget that. Um, but yeah, like they pay me to go interact with the world. Like I would have to go look for that otherwise.
Yeah,
They pay me to
exactly.
be there. It's crazy.
And
Yeah.
you did a good job too that you're helping people, so they kind of want to receive that. But I think that's
Yeah.
cool.
I was building super expensive boats for rich people, and that was part of that decision process. I was like, I don't think I can do this like with enthusiasm. Like,
Yeah.
I need to be doing something that fits like my calling. So yeah, that's part of it.
No, I think that's good
Uh,
advice too for someone's looking for bivocational. Do something that you're still passionate about and something you could still use your ministry. And building boats for rich people, I don't know that's going to fulfill that.
yeah, I learned a lot of crazy woodworking skills, but there's really little application for them on like a day-to-day basis for anybody. I can't even buy the glue that we used to use. So
That's great. All right, so here's our lightning round questions. These are questions I
okay.
ask every pastor. Just real quick answers. Number one is, who's your go-to pastor to listen to, dead or alive?
Uh, Steve, actually, who
All
I wound
right.
up listening to. And
Well,
it's,
he's not even on the podcast.
yeah,
He's usually co-hosting with me, and you got to.
yeah. Well, I would have been really embarrassed, but yeah, like, wow, it's gonna sound like that, but yeah, I like listening to Steve, because I know him and I can talk to him, and he's a really good pastor, like he's a really good teacher.
Yeah,
So
it's great.
also availability matters. It's one of the reasons we went with like Subsplash and got an app, and because it's like being able to get the content is a thing. I'm just super lazy. I don't go look for it very good, but I like listening to Steve. So,
That's
yep.
awesome. How about a recent good read, a book you've been reading that you think would be cool for guys to know?
One of my favorite books that I haven't been reading lately because I gave it to one of my elders to read, and he hasn't finished it yet. Actually, he hasn't started it yet. He needs to get on the stick. It is Preachers and Preaching, Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Okay, awesome.
That's one of my favorite ones.
And last one is, what's one piece of advice you'd give for someone in ministry, whether it's full time or part time? What's a piece of advice you just like want to impart to someone?
I think don't grow weary in doing good. In due time, you'll reap a harvest. Part of that, it's part of it, like what we were talking about, that being faithful. But think about that. We want to see things happen, and get discouraged when the timeline doesn't fit our expectations, and to not be discouraged in the day of small things. So.
No, that's good. I appreciate it. Tom, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and hanging out with me. I appreciate your time, and praying for you guys and what God's doing there in Walla Walla. I know, it's a stone's throw away from Tri-Cities, so we see you guys quite often, but it is really cool to see what God's been doing over the years there in your ministry. So
great. Thank you, Zach. Thanks for talking with me, and appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Yep. Thanks, man. The EQ Podcast is here as a resource for our listeners. Check us out at eqministry.com. On our website, you'll find a variety of helpful tools, including past ministry conferences and a contact form to seek out help or counsel from seasoned Calvary pastors who want to encourage you in your serving or answer your ministry-related questions. Until next time, God bless.